It's a day when we recall that 75 years ago, in fact, there was a declaration issued, which is, if you like, the political manifesto, the political vision that set out that the European continent should integrate in economic terms. And in fact, what we see is that we now have a European Union which is very well integrated, with a huge political dimension, a significantly increasing security dimension, and we are unapologetically proud of this effort because it has brought stability to a part of the world that knew instability for centuries. So, 75 years since that vision was set out. That is what I want to convey. I was told to prepare a short intervention, so I will stick to my short intervention, but I hope that we will have plenty of time for questions and answers. And I will start, if you allow, with a small personal note, which is that I have been in Bangladesh, which is a pretty vibrant and energetic place, for 8 months. I am here with my family, living through what is an evidently tumultuous period of profound political transition. I find this presents a moment of opportunity for the European Union to deepen and widen its partnership with Bangladesh. And I want to convey that for me it is particularly important that the European Union is not just sitting here in Dhaka, but we are travelling around the country, visiting each of the divisions, and it is still my ambition to visit all of the divisions in my first year in this job, to listen to people outside of Dhaka, to meet with the private sector, with young people, with women, and to understand what their priorities are. So overall, an incredible impression left with me, but also with my family, I can tell you, of colour, energy, and an ambition to do things differently. That's my personal remark. My general remark is that the European Union is experiencing a world which is incredibly contested currently. It's unstable and it is changing fast. The European Union is adapting to these new realities. In fact, we have no option other than to adapt. And it is important that in a country like Bangladesh, where indeed, as you mentioned, we have a long history as your major commercial partner and as a development cooperation partner, it is important to understand that we are moving towards ever closer union, and that this is so evidently the case when it comes to the stepping up of our security and defence capabilities. So you will have seen perhaps that this is a major topic of discussion in Brussels. I want to mention as well that we are determined to build up the European Union's strategic autonomy, and that we are determined to ensure that our business is competitive and has access around the world to ensure that our citizens enjoy prosperity and jobs. Absolutely our starting point as the European Union. Finally, perhaps, to say that we are staying the course on climate change. So the world is an unstable place, but it needs leadership, and we are in the business of looking for partners everywhere, including in Bangladesh, for sharing this leadership on climate change, because each and every country around the world is in the same boat. Now, universal values are obviously something that we believe in very strongly. They underpin the European Union's very existence. We stand firm on those values. We have built them together with many, many other nations since 1945. We defend and promote a rules-based international order, not the law of the strongest. We look to our partners, including here in Dhaka, to speak up vocally alongside us in defence of rules that protect us all. We are still building bridges with those who, like us, care about fair and rules-based trade as the basis for the creation of wealth and jobs for our citizens. And I have already mentioned how proud we are of how much we have achieved in Europe in the past 75 years in terms of integration. And I just want to illustrate that we are also proud of our role in global affairs. So I will illustrate this with very simple facts, which is that the European Union population is 5.5% of the global population. We are responsible for 6.7% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is far, far below per head our major other industrial countries. We have an economy which represents 14.7% of the global GDP, but we are financing 31% of humanitarian assistance and 43% of development assistance. So we are far and above partnering with countries which are in the process of developing, because we believe that your prosperity is our prosperity too. Perhaps a final general comment: the Brussels effect is very strong. It's our soft power. We regulate in Brussels, and the impact is felt around the world. This is also something we are proud of. We believe that our governance is open. It is certainly democratic. It is transparent. It involves civil society and the private sector, and therefore you reach a very high level of governance that we are happy to see influencing decision makers around the world. Now let me turn to the relationship with Bangladesh, which I think is of greatest interest to you, colleagues. So I've spoken about the global challenges which are on the increase. There is no denying that, but as we see the global challenges grow, I think the impact on us is certainly that our conviction that we need to deepen and widen our partnership with Bangladesh also grows. And this is, for us, the relationship is a strategic choice. And we put at the center of this strategic choice respect for fundamental rights and the creation of economic opportunity. And in saying this, I spoke about the fact that your prosperity is our prosperity, but your stability is also our stability. This is a highly interconnected world in which we live. So it's a partnership we are building, and I have a number of comments that I think I want to share with you to frame our Q&A session afterwards. And the first is that we support very strongly the reform ambitions of your interim government. You may know that Professor Yunus has already twice met with President von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. You may not know, but I would like to tell you that we are conducting negotiations with your interim government to agree on a comprehensive partnership and cooperation agreement. That's a treaty basis for a more ambitious relationship in future. And I'm sure you are aware that Professor Yunus invited the EU 27 ambassadors and me to meet with him in December, and we did so as an expression of our interest in promoting the emergence of an ambitious reform agenda in this country. So, sitting here as an observer, 8 months into my job here, what I see is that your political transition ongoing is a unique opportunity for you to underpin respect for fundamental rights in Bangladesh, to restore democracy, and to let civil society breathe. And in civil society, I include the media. Of course, this is Bangladesh's reform agenda that we are seeing emerge from the current situation, but allow me to share that in my own adult lifetime, and I am the same age as your wonderful country, but in my own adult lifetime, I have seen half of the European continent transit from autocracy to democracy. And this is what you are doing, and it's also why we know that we have relevant experience to share with you, because it is immediate experience. And we know that we can help you in the support of the conduct of free and fair elections, which we also support. We want to support freedom of expression, even when the views expressed may offend some. Freedom of expression applies also in those circumstances. we support work to counter corruption, and we support the work to establish an independent judiciary that upholds the rights of all, that ensures accountability and due process. And in fact, allow me to say that these comments on where we think we can help Bangladesh in its political transition, they are actually extremely important for the European Union, because we need Bangladesh to preserve the space in which we can work to widen and deepen our relationship. So, I move on. We offer more profound security cooperation. We're working on port safety with Bangladesh, on maritime security as well. But given the level of insecurity in this world, we want to also see military-to-military cooperation between the EU military staff and the military here in Bangladesh. We are working also on countering terrorism and countering violent extremism across the region, and that is equally an important area for us to continue to cooperate upon. When it comes to migration, we support safe, dignified and regular migration. More often than not, unfortunately, migration can be irregular, undignified and extremely dangerous. We prefer to look for legal pathways for migration, even if this is on a small scale, because what happens currently, regrettably, is that more often than not, poor migrants try to reach Europe with a dream of prosperity, which we can all understand, but they are in fact exploited by traffickers and smugglers along the way, and they even lose their lives. And this is something that we need to put order into, and it's a shared interest, I think, between the EU and Bangladesh, but also between us and journalism, because responsible journalism informing migrants about the risks or about the opportunities is something that is extremely important to us. The EU is open for fair business. It is clearly the case. We will continue to work towards ensuring a smooth graduation from LDC status for Bangladesh. We do support an ambitious labour reform agenda here, including long overdue improvements in terms of inspection, or the elimination of child labour, or the right of workers to organise. We promote greater diversification of your economy and the creation of greater economic value added in this country, not in countries where you export semi-finished goods to, and not in countries where you import raw materials from. You need a more complex value chain, in our view, where you are building wealth for your citizens who are very talented individuals. We are, in return, expecting a level playing field for our trade and our investment, a level playing field. So we need your economy to open up in sectors where our private sector can bring world-class technology. We need you to understand, your authorities to understand that of course we have economic interests, and we also have a very significant trade deficit with your country. That is not our obsession, but we do want to see greater trade and investment between the EU and Bangladesh going in both directions. I want to turn to perhaps the fact that we are already a partner in investment, but it's not on the same scale as our trading relationship. We want to increase it. And this partnership in investment takes the form of foreign direct investment, of course, as you might imagine, but equally we are still here investing funding in infrastructure development, so in water, in digital, with Bangladesh to ensure that you have the platform on which your own. So, let me say that regional cooperation is a very important element of this work. Disaster preparedness, development cooperation, these are the traditional lenses through which you view the relationship with the European Union. We are still here as your steadfast partner. I can tell you that we are investing in better healthcare, better education and skills, and also social security in the country. But I'm trying to illustrate with that we work together on climate change. So we don't think anyone can be left behind when it comes to a clean energy transition. We think it's extremely important that Bangladesh has more ambition when it comes to its green transition, because this will also be part of your future market access to the European Union, which we want to preserve and build upon. And as I said already, but I think it bears saying one more time, when it comes to climate change, we, the European Union, are in the same boat with you, Bangladesh, because you are climate vulnerable, but we have the fastest warming continent on the globe. So let me just say, we are listening. I'm listening to you. We are holding dialogues with young people as well with you today, and to listen to your questions. Thank you.
Bangladesh. So yesterday our national security is humanitarian corridor, but rather it is humanitarian passage. And the second thing is the UN local office.
According to Transparency's report of the United Nations, at least 1,400 people, including child and women, were killed. And the UN strongly recommended that all the perpetrators involved in this genocide must be held accountable and face their trial. What is the UN position, EU position on this issue? Thank you.
It's getting more complex, and Bangladesh is under fresh pressure to get more Rohingya to recognize new arrivals even. So what is your position in this regard? Thank you.
Interest in the views of the European Union on these very significant matters. What I would like to start with is the Rohingya crisis, where we recognise that there is an enormous effort being made by Bangladesh in hosting so many refugees from violence across the border, and we also recognise that there are even new arrivals to this day, which illustrates that the violence continues and that Rohingya living in Rakhine State still feel insecure. So unfortunately, this is a crisis that goes on and on and on, despite the best efforts of Bangladesh and of partners like the European Union, where we are indeed trying very hard to support a political solution, which is the only solution to this crisis. We, the European Union, have imposed sanctions on members of the military regime. We have imposed sanctions on those we consider to be perpetrating acts of unbelievable violence and cruelty on their own population on the other side of the border. But allow me to speak a bit beyond the political wish we have to see a solution. So, in very practical terms, we are standing alongside your authorities in helping you cope with the refugee presence in Cox's Bazar. We have contributed over €500 million in humanitarian assistance since this wave of refugees started to come to your country. And the problem is that humanitarian assistance, once it's spent, it's gone. And what we are trying to do is to keep people's heads above water all the time. And given what we see currently in terms of the funding needs, there is an enormous black hole in the financing. So work is going on to try to prioritise what the international community can fund here. What is a priority for the European Union is to stretch our funding as far as it possibly can go in terms of meeting the needs on the ground. And this is why we are exploring with your government how we can try to give the skills to the refugees while they're here to be more self-reliant, so that when they go back, when circumstances might one day exist for them to return, they will be able themselves to not be dependent on aid on the other side of the border, but be able to look after themselves. What I have to say, and it's very important, is that we have many conversations with the Bangladeshi authorities. Those conversations always conclude with a common understanding that return can only be safe, dignified and voluntary. We all know that the refugees should go back one day. They cannot go back in circumstances where their lives are at risk.
Design, elegance, beauty.
সেরা পণ্য সবার জন্য
Jevico.
Now, the question on the definition of a corridor versus the definition of a passage, I am unable to give you an inside information. What I can tell you is that as a humanitarian partner for Bangladesh, we are quite happy to be pragmatic about how we can meet the needs of the refugees. If the refugees are here, we will meet their needs here. If they are on the other side of the border, because the situation might one day improve, we will also look at how we can channel assistance to them there, because it can be cross-border. We have done cross-border assistance in other parts of the world, and it can work, but it can only work when individuals are safe on both sides of the border and when governments agree. And those are the conditions. So you cannot have a situation in which you try to work in this cross-border way, but it merely attracts attention from violent perpetrators of crimes. So these are the caveats that I would want to see in place. Now, the second sort of set of questions, I think, were around the uprising of last year and accountability and the crimes that have been perpetrated in the context of the uprising, but actually also in the years preceding the events of last summer. So here, what I would want to say is that we do, of course, support the work of the UN fact-finding mission. Their report was exceptionally clear. And now the next step is for the judicial authorities in Bangladesh to hold those who are accused of criminal acts responsible. So there has to be accountability. And I think when I look at the situation here and I look ahead to the next stage of your political transition, I think if an individual is accused of a serious crime, there should be evidence. If there is evidence, then those individuals should be brought to trial. If there is a trial, it should not be with undue delay, and it should not be on the basis of charges which are imprecise. It should be according to what I would consider to be very clear standards that should apply in all judiciaries. And that is the way I hope that Bangladesh will deal with the challenges of the recent period, which you have gone through, and these have been very terrible crimes that have been perpetrated, but accountability must be transparent, and it also must be fair, and it should respect the rights of every single person for due process. There was a question, I think, on political parties working together. Did I understand the question correctly? So do I see that the political parties have space to work together? I think it's a very good question, because the political parties are, in this period of political transition, very supportive of the interim government, but also looking to see how they can maximize their political support, create a bit of elbow room in the context of democratic elections, which will take place sooner or later. So there is maybe not a tension between these two issues, but of course you see that different voices in the political parties feel the need to speak up and argue the case for the political support that they want to win in future elections. What I see, though, is that there is a process ongoing in this NCC, the Commission, chaired by Professor Yunus with the Deputy Ali Riaz, which is trying very hard to build the consensus between political parties that is going to be needed if you are going to take forward ambitious, profound reforms on very important issues in the short term. The European Union, as I said, we support an ambitious reform agenda. We are waiting for the political parties and the interim government to agree on what we hope will be a very clearly prioritised and specific list of reforms that we can then get behind. Because as I mentioned, I think we do have experience which is helpful. We do have financing which can support, and we have the political will to stand with you in this work. Thank you.
Under the Election Commission standing project.
General election, that the chief advisor said that election will be held within the January, December, June next year. But at the same time, he said in an interview with Al Jazeera, he said that people do not want election at this moment. So it's a contradictory remarks from the chief advisor. Do you think the election will be in a stipulated time? What is your expectation? This is one, and if the election will be an inclusive one.
Bangladesh government to help the UN government to have that. Is there any update regarding this government?
And we know that in the Pacific region, especially in the southeastern region of Bangladesh.
I'll try my best. So there was a question on our work with the Election Commission. So indeed, I have been engaging with the chairman, and my colleagues have been engaging with the Commission more generally to try to identify where the European Union can be most helpful in supporting the conduct of the elections in line with international standards. So that's where we are. We absolutely want the elections, when they are held, to be ones that we can look at and say, this is free and fair, the result is entirely credible, and thank you. And we want to be part of that success story, because it will be, if you like, a very significant milestone in your political transition. Not the end of it, I would say, at all, but a very significant milestone that we recognise. So we are in the process of contracting entities that will work with the Commission on domestic election observation, that will work to ensure that your citizens are aware, they have civic education when it comes to the conduct of democratic elections, and we are also working to make sure that disinformation is not something that we see undermining the free and fair conduct of the polls when they happen. Now, it's not all we're planning to do, but this is what we have in the pipeline at this moment. There was a question about timing, and I think that I have to say that timing is a matter for Bangladesh to take a decision upon. We see this political transition as leading up to democratic elections, so that's the important milestone I mentioned. But as the European Union, we don't have an opinion on time, and we are not pressuring anyone to hold elections on a particular date. We do think that there needs to be sufficient time to implement reforms under this interim government, so we think that that is something where a bit of space needs to exist, and this is why when I spoke earlier about the NCC work, that we think that let us see how much consensus is created according to the timeline foreseen. Now, there was a question on visas. I think we recognise that it can be a challenge. The challenge has emerged, if you like, since the uprising of last year, because in previous years many individual citizens would travel to your neighbour to obtain a visa, and that channel is now extremely restricted, if not ended. So we recognise that there is an issue. There is a difference between short-term visas and long-term visas, because short-term visas are issued according to European law, and long-term visas are issued by the member states themselves. So that distinction is important, because here in Bangladesh we have 7 member state embassies, and they actually cooperate with member states who are not physically present to issue Schengen visas. So for short-term trips, for visits by journalists or the private sector or academics, that process actually works quite smoothly. For the longer-term visas, we are in a situation where a number of our member states are adapting to the evolving situation, so they would now expect citizens to travel to Bangkok, for example, to obtain visas. I understand your concern, and what I can say now is that we have absolutely internalized the request that we see from many quarters to work more on the issuance of visas here. So we will see what is possible. On the issue of the return or the seizure of assets and its return, so I mean, we are as shocked as anyone to see the reports issued from Bangladesh about the extent of money laundering and theft from your financial sector, from your industrial entities in the previous 15 years. When it comes to returning funds, what is very important to stress is that this is not an issue where the EU is going to act. It is our member states who will act, because if you want the recovery of stolen assets, you need to share with our member state judicial authorities sufficient credible evidence so that the judiciary can act. And that is the challenge. So it is coming up with meeting the evidentiary benchmark that will allow us to act. You can be sure that our judicial authorities will act with alacrity when they see evidence of wrongdoing, but it's worth bearing in mind that the recovery of stolen assets tends to take quite some time. It's not for the short term. You tend to see it happening over a number of years because it is a judicial process that has to be gone through. Now, on security cooperation, there's no agenda as such. What we consider is that Bangladesh, a secure Bangladesh, is also a secure partner for the European Union. So it's very, very simple. We are here already working, I mentioned, on port security and maritime security, so these are already areas where we have ongoing work with your Coast Guard, with your Navy, and it's very, very good cooperation. However, what I see where there is a need to boost, and this is why I mentioned that we have offered to have military-to-military cooperation, and this would be between the EU military staff and the Bangladesh military. With the aim of exploring step by step how we can work together. So the reason why it's an offer is that this is a dimension which has been unexplored until now at the level of the European Union. Very good contact at the level of our member states, but the European Union as a security actor is a role that is really going fast, and I can mention in this respect the fact that we are now looking to create conditions in which we can see 800 billion euros of investment in our defence industry to rearm Europe between now and 2030, because we find ourselves in Europe with a huge security threat coming from Russia, and we need to maintain peace and a defensive posture, but we have to be credible. The pressure on Myanmar, I mentioned already sanctions and asset freezes on individuals living in Myanmar responsible for atrocities. There is a need to do more, and we are supportive of the intention of Bangladesh and the UN to organise a high-level conference in the margins of the UN General Assembly later this year. So you will see us there making all of the points I have made today about the need for conditions in Myanmar to improve before you can have safe and dignified return, and absolutely committing to continue to channel funding to help a country like Bangladesh, which is it's providing a global public good in hosting 1 million plus refugees. And the last question was on the Global Gateway Forum. So the Global Gateway Forum is happening in Brussels next month. We intend, we hope, that there will be very high level Bangladeshi participation in the forum. It's important because the Global Gateway is our offer to our partners, our offer to Bangladesh to create open and trusted networks. And it's the way by which we are channeling enormous funds to your country with the potential to do much more. And here I can already say that we have a portfolio which is 1 billion euros of lending from us, from the European Investment Bank, which will double. And what I want to let you know, of course, is that the European Investment Bank is active here in Bangladesh because the European Union budget, and this is where I come in, the European Union budget is guaranteeing those loans. So this is the way in which we work. We intend to do much more here in Bangladesh. We have not only this interest in 2 billion.
I have a couple of questions. One is you came Dhaka just after 5th August. At that time, law and order situation was volatile. Now, what is your observation? The situation is cooled down now. Everything is going properly, and we know that your mission is very closely working with our election commission. So, do you have any suggestion of what time election will be held? We know that one of our party, BNP, want it earlier, and the other parties, some other parties, they want it after reforms.
Okay.
So some conflict here. Do you have any suggestion? And number two is you are very vocal about our violence against women and women's voice. Do you have any observation about that?
Not compare before and after like you all can, and perhaps that is a disadvantage. It may also be an advantage that I definitely see opportunity everywhere in this country to drive reforms. Okay, so that's the way I look at it. Do I consider the law and order situation now? How do I perceive it? I think I would like to say that the interim government inherited a very great number of challenges. Security, economy, financial sector. What I see is that there is a direction of travel which is positive. So from a very difficult situation, the transition is certainly not over, but things are moving in the right direction with an awful lot of impressive political will. But these things take time. So rebuilding confidence in the police takes time. Rebuilding networks to understand what is going on in different communities, that takes time. So the direction of travel is very positive, but it is obviously still work in progress. I think I did talk about the timing of the elections, which is to say that it's not our business, in fact, but there was a more elaborate answer earlier. I won't repeat it. On violence against women, so the statistics are really very disturbing if you look at them. And the same is true for child marriage. So things have improved, clearly, from earlier decades. But again, it's work in progress and there's quite some way to go. What I observe is that there is a draft law on anti-discrimination which should be enacted quickly. And I would like to observe that equality between men and women is a core value in Europe, and I think it's a core universal value, quite frankly. And the work of the Women's Reform Commission should be examined extremely carefully because it's important work that should see a translation into reality on the ground. How that happens is a Bangladesh responsibility, but we support all efforts to ensure that there is equality between men and women. We think it's a basic human right, and that is, frankly, completely regardless of which religion you espouse. Jamaat, moving on. So Jamaat visited Brussels, indeed. They were complete self-starters in wanting to go to Brussels and to, I think, explain what their party stands for and how they see the transition in Bangladesh. I can only welcome this, and I can only hope that other political parties would also consider it important that in Brussels, far away, there is a better understanding of the situation on the ground in Bangladesh. We may agree or disagree, but the fact that we discuss Bangladesh is important, and it is important that our political leadership, the members of the European Parliament, that they hear from people, from Bangladeshi citizens, what is going on here. So I think overall it is perfectly normal for political parties to want to explain their views. It is perfectly normal for our bureaucrats and politicians to listen, and it is perfectly normal for me here in Bangladesh to also open my ears to every political party, agree or disagree. We have to understand if we are to do our job professionally. On, I think it may be the last question, if I'm not wrong, but on the corridor issue, I think, again, I did touch on this earlier. We think that the only solution to the Myanmar crisis is a political one. We have imposed sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans on individuals. We think that as long as the refugees are here, as long as a safe and voluntary and dignified return is not possible, we have to remain standing shoulder to shoulder with Bangladesh. And this means that we want to explore how to make the refugees more self-reliant. Very important, because otherwise there will be a problem of lack of funding. We need to do what we can with the authorities to see how to stretch our funding as far as it can go. So it's about investing in shelter that does not need to be replaced every year, which is an enormous cost. It's about trying to encourage the Rohingya to be in a position where they can trade and earn money, so there could be a cash economy in the camps. And it's about making sure that they have the technology to build skills for their own secure financial future. Let me stop there.
Another part of her question,
the report, the recommendations are to us extremely important. We consider that equality between men and women is a core value of the European Union, and we think that the recommendations of the Women's Reform Commission should be looked at extremely carefully and closely by the political parties, because we would like to see them translated into the reality on the ground. Women's experience in Bangladesh is one which continues to be, unfortunately, one of discrimination. We think that this is an issue for you to tackle. We will continue to support efforts to introduce greater equality in your country. We think that it is a universal value. It is not just a European value. Thank you.